Okay, Clay, to kick off our discussion of blood fever, here's a trivia question for you. Hot shot. How many episodes prior to this one, Blood Fever, have focused on the concept of Pon Farr?
We counting movies?
Yes.
And are we saying prior to this that we have seen, or prior to this in chronological order?
That we've seen, production-wise.
I'm going to say including this one, 4.
I think it's just 1.
What?
Is Pon Farr in the movies?
Yeah, doesn't Spock go through Pon Farr when he comes back from being dead? Because that was going to be one of my questions, is I couldn't remember if he has sex with Saavik in part 3.
Oh, that's true. So so there would be 2 then, I guess. Yeah. So
and wasn't there a whole episode on Enterprise about
that's after
T'Pol
this?
Going?
After this, production.
No, that's why I asked. It's why I asked that we have seen.
No, and I said production wise. So like
okay, well, I didn't hear that part.
In the evolution of the series itself, I guess it's 2 at this point then. Although the movie one is throwing me off a little bit because it's not like a focus of it.
Isn't where Spock and Kirk fight each other? Isn't that a Pon Farr episode?
That's the first one. Yes, that's the only one that I could think of that it exists in.
Okay, so my answer is correct as far as the series goes.
Well, you said 4.
Just not specific to the question you asked me. But
it is a correct answer to some other question I might have asked.
As far as the number of Pon Farr episodes in the series that we have seen, the answer is 4, I think.
Probably.
Because I don't think they do one on Deep Space Nine. I'm assuming they don't.
No, maybe not. In the question, your answer is incorrect in the context of the question that I think I asked, which is 1. It's only a mock time.
2 if you count the movie.
Yeah, I didn't. I wonder if the movie sort of count. Like he does go through Pon Farr, so I'll give you that. But I guess that brings up, did they ever mention Pon Farr outside of those 2? Because then I feel like you'd have to accept that as well, because he does go through Pon Farr in the movie, but it's more just, isn't that just a byproduct of his super aging, rapid aging?
Well, yeah, because he ages his way through it.
Yeah. He must have gone through multiple ones then, right? It's every 7 years, as they claim in this episode.
I don't know. She was really tired. She didn't have two in her.
Big headache, migraine headaches.
Mm-hmm.
Blood Fever is the 16th episode. It's only the 16th episode of the 3rd season so far.
Boy.
I was looking at the list on Vudu, and I was shocked by how many episodes are left in this season. That's why I'm saying that.
Yeah, no, I was feeling that too coming into this one. I was thinking like, we must be.
I thought we were near the end.
Close.
Yeah, but we're not. We're halfway through it, basically.
Great.
This is 2 of 3 in the Necrit Expanse arc. I didn't even realize that was part of this arc. Okay.
What was the first one? The last episode?
The first one was the one where they run into the Necrit Expanse, which is Neelix, is like the limits of Neelix's knowledge.
Right. Okay.
Yeah,
Sorry.
I don't think it was the prior episode. I think it was a couple before, but I didn't even know they mentioned the Necrit Expanse in this episode, so who knows. Written by Lisa Klink, directed by Andrew Robinson, in Universe date is 50537.2. Is it, or is it a different? It is him. Yeah, he directed it.
That's fun.
In Universe date 50537.2, which is 2373. In this one, Blood Fever, B'Elanna Torres experiences symptoms similar to Pon Farr after being attacked by Ensign Vorik, who was also undergoing the blood fever. Do you want to defend your claim that Star Trek is sexier than Star Wars at this point, or should we go in another direction?
No, I absolutely do, because I was thinking about that the entire time. Because I was thinking about
That's
how...
not all.
I was thinking about how that argument that Star Trek is sexless, where somehow Star Wars is the sexier option of the sci-fi epics.
Right, when you're looking for a sexy night out on the town with your lady friend, you choose either Star Wars or Star Trek, and it seems like Star Trek is the option to go with.
Yeah, where if you look at Star Wars, there have been 4 kisses in 9 movies, and
just one virgin birth, though.
One virgin birth. Well, technically 2, depending on how you. If you do Dave's math on when Luke and Leia were conceived, who knows who their father is? But even there, like, there's no. All of the one of those kisses is between a brother and a sister.
Nice. That's a big genre these days.
Yeah, and it's not exactly it's not exactly heating it up in the Star Wars universe. Whereas in Star Trek, the Vulcans have an entire word for extreme horniness.
Yeah,
and the Klingons are well known as people who have sex so hard they break things.
Yep. Remember all the DS9 episodes where Worf and Dax would come into sickbay with like broken bones and stuff from their passionate romance? This is blood fever. I don't know. It's sort of a symptom of the. I was extremely frustrated with this episode for a while, and then they did the thing that, like, I'm sure everyone is just screaming at the screen, which is just like have Vorik have sex with a holodeck character. And
that was my immediate first thing. It's like, why is this an issue?
And that made me feel somewhat better, even though when the reveal comes up, they treat it as if it's some genius idea that the Doctor has come up with, and it's like literally the first thing that anyone in this universe would think of is send him into the holodeck.
And it doesn't work.
And it doesn't. Well, he chooses not to, I assume. But so on a like, I am going to apologize to podcast listeners that I feel that this. I have not had a lot of time to think about this episode, but I feel that there's a lot to think about and say about this one. Unfortunately, this is going to be more of like a fly by the seat of my pants type discussion. But the technical problem that I have with it, and I know we've talked about this before because I watched the episode thinking we've talked about this on the podcast. They have never justified why you just can't have sex to stop Pon Farr from killing people. You know?
Yeah, isn't that how it works?
That is how it works, but they tried, like in this episode or like why he can't just rub one out. Like, what are the rules of Pon Farr? Does he have to have sex? Can he not just...
I'm going to assume yes. Let's give them at least that benefit of the doubt that there needs to be actual copulation involved.
If so, why? Well, like,
I don't know.
Well, that's the problem with the metaphor is that there's like, and because he has to have sex with someone, right? They have to put it into this setting where Tom Paris having sex with B'Elanna is apparently like equivalent to sexual assault, even though it will save her life, you know? So there's this weird problem it has, which is that like you can't have the sex because this is a PG Star Trek show and because we have to add some little bit of drama to it. But if you don't, the outcome is extremely negative, and it's not something that the person going through Pon Farr would want. They would not prefer to die than have sex. You know what I mean?
Sure.
So I feel that the Pon Farr episodes outside of the TOS episode just really, they have this trouble where they're limited in like, how do you justify the drama of Pon Farr when it seems that there are multiple outlets for people that no one ever wants to take? But what say you?
Yeah, I mean, I think the problem is the understanding of it is probably more. I'm assuming that there's just more layers to it than just the mechanical execution of fornication solves the problem. Because I mean, if that was the case, I feel like they would deal with it differently, and I don't think that makes it easier for Tom to be like, sure, I'll just have sex with you, because she's still compromised by something that isn't she's been infected somehow with Vulcan horniness because he touched her in the face. I guess.
But she's going to die if she doesn't have sex or fight somebody, right? That's the outcome.
I guess, yeah.
So, like, what's the what's the ethical? I can understand they're making a roofie analogy when a roofie analogy doesn't make any sense, because a roofie analogy is you do that to someone and take advantage of them because they're compromised. But this is not. This is like someone has cancer and is upset about it, and to save their and cure their cancer, you could have sex with them, but you're like, this isn't right. You're just not well. You're not well. I can't have sex with you. You're sick. It doesn't make any sense.
Yeah, I guess. I think that they are definitely leaning more towards the roofie analogy. But yeah, I guess. Yeah, I guess I don't really have any response to that.
But Tom and B'Elanna end up trying to have sex in the episode too, you know?
Yeah, that's the thing that was the weirdest part for me, is that Tom Paris goes out of his way to be like, I don't want to take advantage of you, and even if this does work, you're going to feel bad about it, I'm going to feel bad about it. And then eventually he's like, well, I guess why not? Like, he has his turn is
once
very
they get out of the
surprising.
cave. Once they get out of the cave, he wants to go back in, if you know what I mean.
Right. It was very it was very confusing from that standpoint. And then that final scene in the turbo lift, he just kind of turns into a creep.
Yep.
Because he's like, I will not. The whole episode, he's like, I will not take advantage of you. And then later on, he's like, well, if it'll save the universe or it'll save your life, sure, why not? And then afterwards, he's like, you were pretty hot when you were all fucked up. I hope it can. I hope to see it again. So, like, it's a very strange arc for him in this episode.
Yeah. No, he goes on quite a journey. I really have to hammer the point. I just don't. There's no reason not to have sex with those people, or to have them have sex with like. In this
I hope you don't ever run for office, because that's going in a campaign.
In this utopian Pon Farr in 2024, that's the platform. There's just no good, like, there's just no good argument against it in this utopian Star Trek universe, that you would think that this would be a thing that would be certainly like understandable and something that the crew would be willing to work around and see it as like they would be almost past the dramatic flair that maybe, like, in a perfect franchise, Enterprise would deal with this in a more 90210 way, because Enterprise is the proto series before we develop that heightened TNG ethos where it's like do the right thing at all costs. Mm-hmm. And you'd think that where Voyager is in the timeline, this shouldn't be that big of a deal. And so I get really hung up on just the mechanics of how this works. Why like, again, they will die if they don't end the Pon Farr. Like, Tuvok is like their balls explode. Like, they just the entire universe collapses around them. We'll have to get to Tuvok in this too, because I think Tuvok is this bizarre character in this episode, but I don't know. It's not done well enough, or there's no bad outcome to people just having sex and getting it over with, and so it comes across as this really super.
How many people heard that from you in college?
It's still ongoing. This is exactly listen. There's no reason this can't happen. I got the Pon Farr. Amy will not get that reference, I don't think. I just think that it's a strangely conservative. It's like conservative without a point, like socially conservative without a point, almost, about why we can't have sex, and I don't get it. Really, and I know it's because it's a PG show and family is watching it and stuff, and so the easy solution is not the one that the show can actually do. But I don't know what it is, but I feel like you have to add something to the people who are suffering from Pon Farr to make it not just seem like an obvious solution.
Well, I don't know. I think the problem is that is the fact that it kills them. It seems a little drastic.
Okay, and, so you would undo that. Yeah, I would, not to interrupt, but like I think that if you made it more of an analogy about like sort of a pent-up sexual frustration and the bad outcomes that can come from that, I'd be willing. Like, imagine if Vorik started sabotaging the ship, because
Right.
he's gone crazy with horniness or something. I would buy that much more than
Someone, please, fuck this man.
and he's actively trying to avoid it. In the modern parlance, you could turn it into like an incel metaphor, right?
Right.
But they don't do that with it. It's so. I didn't mean to interrupt, but imagine if they did something where he was not dying from it, but it caused a bigger problem that they had to get rid of.
Yeah, I think that's the more interesting answer, honestly, because having them, it is a very the whole setup for this episode, I think, is kind of hindered by that element of it, because the holodeck thing isn't the first thing. Like, it takes them half the episode to come up with that idea, and then they have to strand Torres on a planet in a fucking cave in order to make it necessary to go through with it on her end.
Yeah.
And it's just a really the only when the entire stakes to this problem are they need to have sex or they're gonna die. I feel like that's, I don't know. It just it makes things really. If that's the only thing you're focusing on, then you got to start doing these backflips as to, why, like you're saying, why they can't just do it.
Why it can't happen. Yeah. I mean, it's a lot of pressure on. It's a lot of pressure on a series that has not done characterization well, where Tom Paris is concerned about losing his friendship or whatever he has with B'Elanna,
Well, I mean, I think the other thing is, too, I don't really remember if they've done this, but clearly they are. It's not just that he's doing it for surface level, chivalrous, the right thing to do reasons. He likes her.
Yeah.
He actually has an actual crush on her or whatever you want. He has affection for her, feelings or whatever.
Yeah.
And so them having sex there in that way would probably be detrimental to whatever they were going to do afterwards, if anything.
Yeah.
So like, and
do you think in a
don't know
selfish way? Do you think he's being selfish there? Is like I guess that's the way my mind would go.
I think it gets really dicey when you get into a situation like this where it's someone who is out of their mind, dying or not. You are. I don't even know if taking advantage is the right word, but when the way that the sexual autonomy works its way into this, I think things get really dicey very quickly. But I think that I don't remember. Have they really leaned into at all the fact that he has the hots for Torres?
No, they're just kind of flirty with each other. There might have been some kind of offhand reference, but I don't think they've ever made anything explicit.
Yeah, and so that makes that. I don't think that really works that well because it's not like they're playing off of something they've been establishing for 2 seasons or 3 seasons or whatever. Yeah. And also, if someone should have told Paris if she just gets in a fight, that works too, because then he should have just punched her in the nose and then just gone that route with it and be like, you know what? If we fight each other, this will, in the long run, be much better than if we sleep together.
Well, isn't that weird? Isn't that a strange? That's like the epitome of that argument. That's like you can't have sex in a movie because it'll give it an R rating, but you can blow a guy's arm off with a grenade.
Yeah.
I really think that you are undervaluing how bizarre it is that I think you're overvaluing the diciness of having sex with someone who's suffering from this Pon Farr thing, right? Like if there was no death thing attached to it, maybe there's a downside to this, I guess. Although, like, I don't even think Pon Farr is portrayed as like a person has completely lost their mind and are not in control of themselves. Like Vorik is able to meditate around it. He's able to control himself. So it doesn't come to me like they are a completely...
But Torres is not Vulcan, though. Like, this is completely put onto her. Like, she doesn't know how to handle this.
Right, and I think that they sort of tie that into the franchise. It's like her half Klingon part is sort of coming out, is being affected by it, which is making her a little bit more aggressive and stuff. But I still don't... I would need to be extremely convinced that this is having sex with a person who's suffering from Pon Farr and is going to die from it potentially, unless you figure out later. If Tuvok had told them they could have just fought, that's the angle you have to take, right? Like if Tuvok brings up the fact that, well, you could have sex or you could fight with each other, I think that there is an actual interesting argument about the idea of that movie point, which is like, which would you rather have? Would you rather engage in violence with each other, or the peep show line, would you rather make love to me? And if the show chooses violence, that's an interesting decision on a cultural level, right? If the show chooses sex, that's also an interesting decision. But the way that it's portrayed is that violence and beating the shit out of each other is better than sex. And also, I don't really have a good argument for it, but I don't buy them being that compromised to be an excuse to not do it, really, because I think that the stakes are so high, you have to. I don't know. It's tough.
Yeah, I think it's a weird. I don't know. It's a weird thing that I don't know if they've completely thought out. Maybe they've overthought this stuff out. I don't really know. But I do agree with your initial point where it's like at this point in the Star Trek timeline, I feel like there should be fail-safes involved for when this does inevitably happen
right.
to the Vulcans who are on practically every ship.
Yeah, that's fair.
Like what was going to happen with Tuvok if he was going through it on, you know what I mean? Like it's not like this wasn't going to happen eventually.
Yeah. How come it's not Tuvok in this episode? What's the advantage of having this character Vorik that they invented clearly for this purpose, because he's only appeared a couple episodes ago? This actor is actually the son of Jerry Taylor, who's the showrunner of Voyager at this point. Yeah, and he's not bad as a Vulcan either. I will give him credit. He's pretty good.
They've got his face painted like slightly green. He looks like Frankenstein's monster. I don't know.
He is
why.
kind of olive colored. Yeah.
I don't know why they give him that like gaunt looking makeup.
He's all backed up.
What was your question?
What the hell?
Why not Tuvok?
Why not Tuvok? Yeah. Tuvok's got a wife.
Right. I think. I mean, maybe that's part of it. Like, I mean, maybe that's when the conservatism does kind of come out, where it's like, well, Tuvok is because if you're looking at what's going on here, it's what's the guy's name?
Vorik.
Vorik gets super horny and then infects Torres after like forcing himself on her slightly.
Yeah.
And then he eventually goes so crazy that he disables the shuttles and the transporter, but somehow manages to transport himself down to the planet.
Yeah.
And I think it's one of those things where they were like, this is too many things for one of our principal good guys to do, but that also undercuts the whole severity of the shit.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah. I would buy it more if Tuvok was doing it instead of Ensign Vorik. You know?
Yeah, and I mean, it is funny how in this iteration of Pon Farr, it's like this drives this guy so crazy that he starts doing this insane shit and shutting off all these things. In Enterprise, it's like she just wants to fuck so bad, and she just keeps taking her clothes off and like shivering in a. I don't know how to handle this, guys.
It's much sexier. Yeah, no, it's poor T'Pol. Yeah, I would have preferred to have Tuvok do it. I mean, the wife thing adds the drama that is necessary, right?
Right, yeah. It also, if I was anybody else on the ship, I'd be like, maybe we don't go to Tuvok for meditation services, because everybody who doesn't seem to get fixed by whatever he tells them to do.
I guess he's the only gig in town or something. Like he's a terrible guitar player, but he's the only one you can get lessons from, so you go to him anyway. Yeah, Tuvok's not really living it up.
And he doesn't do anything. Like, you'd think he would be more involved here. You know, why isn't it, if not Tuvok, maybe the more interesting answer is, if not Tuvok, the one who has Pon Farr, why not Tuvok be the one that Torres is coming on to? And so then what is the Vulcan response to that?
Oh, right. Yeah.
You know?
Because I really wish I had time to think. I find Tuvok's role in this whole episode to be kind of bizarre, and it's probably an example of like he's being written a certain way because that's the way that the story wants to go, rather than Tuvok is naturally responding to things. Like for the severity of Pon Farr, I don't, and I think the Doctor kind of brings this up, but I don't buy the fact that the Vulcans would not talk to each other about this. You know, because the Doctor's
totally.
like,
well, yeah,
talk to him. And Tuvok's like, well, it's personal. You know, it's like, well, he's going to become basically like a homicidal maniac. So maybe you should do something with him to come to a solution. But Tuvok seems very hands off. And then at the very end, he's just like, no, they definitely have to fight. Like no one touched them. Just let them do it.
Would you say that the Vulcan society is not a inherently kind of conservative society? Because it feels like it kind of is. It feels like it kind of fits, right?
Because
they suppress their emotions, obviously, and it seems like it. I don't think that is that out of that weird for them to be like, also we don't talk about sex.
So this is the conflict. I would 100% agree with you that I could buy if Pon Farr was portrayed as a great embarrassment upon like the Vulcan accomplishments of logic to this point. Like it is the thing that they try to hide, that they don't talk about, that they're embarrassed by. However, they are not like on Vulcan right now. You know, like they're in a weird situation where Tuvok is the only one that can talk to this guy. So it's time to put like, it's time, you know, I feel the episode could have gone in that way, which is that like dealing with greatly embarrassing cultural issues is kind of a point that they could have done. And, make Tuvok actually talk to this guy and make it be built around that fact about like getting over this cultural embarrassments and something. But Tuvok just says, no, I don't talk to people. We don't talk about this. So we'll have to figure something else out. And it's just, I find it remarkably unhelpful in the position that Voyager finds itself in.
I also think that there is I'm not totally sure if it's just sex that solves the problem, because I think the way that they set it up is more conservative than that, because he doesn't just ask Torres on a date. He asks her to marry him. And anytime that when they talk about this in the episode, he refers to it as going back and taking a mate.
Yes,
which obviously is a euphemism, but it's also, I feel like there is a larger cultural significance to it, that it's not just every 7 years I go back to the town I grew up in and hang out at the bar and wait for a girl I knew from high school to swing by. You know, I think there's a larger thing baked into it. But the weird thing about that is, even if that's true, if you apply that to the Torres situation, it's firing up her Klingon-ness, which I don't think the Klingons really give a shit if you're married or not in any situation.
Yeah, I was going to say that I interpret the Vulcan response to me more just in line with a cultural response than. So that's what leads me to think that it is purely just the sex act. And the Vulcans treat the sex act as different than the Klingons do. Like the Vulcans are much more conservative in that regard, which is that they seem like, you know, in the franchise they have arranged marriages since they're kids.
Right.
You know, so they're like they build themselves up to react to this Pon Farr event because they have a spouse that is supposed to be there for them to help them deal with it, which is what Amok Time was about. Spock going back to see his mate or whatever.
Also, what's the timeline here? How much time do they get? Does that mean that Vulcans have to always be within 3 days travel of Vulcan or something?
7 years. They're like cicadas, right? They can time it.
7 years.
It's every 7 years. Yeah. So they just have to. It's like their pilgrimage back home. And I guess you can plan around it. I think maybe that's another thing. Like maybe Vorik should have put this on like the Team Google calendar. Yeah. Just kind of X off this week. I'm going to be out of business, guys. Yeah. It comes back to that's why the sex thing is the only thing that really defines it to me. It's the Vulcans are monogamous and like old-fashioned and conservatively socially conservative, and the Klingons are more wild and take what you can and violence and give what you get, I guess. But either way, the sex seems to cure the problem. So I don't know.
Yeah, I found the whole episode to be I thought it was fine. Like it was, I would say it's like a solid 3 of an episode, but I found it to be just a real potpourri of Star Trek nonsense backflipping to accommodate this Pon Farr thing. Because like once the rock people show up, I was like, what's going on?
Oh, the rock people, yeah.
What is this subplot for? And obviously, the only purpose of that subplot is to
get the Borg
to get the Borg in there. But like it's like there's rock people that are.
Well, hold on. The rock people. The only reason it exists is to get the Borg, which makes the rock people's dialogue almost incomprehensible in retrospect, right? If you go back and the rock people are like, "Is that a phaser? Let me see that." Yeah, that's a phaser. What's that? A scanning device? Yeah, that's a scanning device. It's like, what are they talking about? Why are they asking such bizarre questions? Yeah.
Well, I mean, I'm assuming it's because I was going to say I'm assuming it's because Starfleet comes from a different culture with different technology. So who's to say what is a weapon or what is these things, pieces of machinery they have? However, the rock people are holding like Paramount backlot prop room stock weapon guns.
They're holding phaser rifles that have been painted a different color.
So it's not exactly like they don't understand what a phaser might look like.
Well, the guy identifies everything. He's like, is that a weapon? Is that a scanning device? Like he knows what everything is. So it's not like there's a sort of mystery about what's going on. They're just that was just a subplot just shoved in there to hopefully the people watching the episode as it aired didn't turn off the episode because they thought there was 10 seconds left and like, I gotta go get to the bar.
Well, think about the first time you saw a flip phone.
Right.
I'm sure you're like, "What is that? A phone?
Is that a phone? Or is that a pancake?
It's a phone. It's the best phone." But yeah, the rock people show up, and that's weird. Like that whole thing is weird. Like it. Why have the rock people show up and give this other ridiculous business to do when if the payoff is the Borg, it's almost kind of more interesting to be like, hey, everybody's fucking dead here. This is a clearly
like
used
an
to
abandoned
it used to be an inhabited planet, but why is everybody dead? And then they find the Borg and like, oh shit, the Borg. But they just all the rock people stuff feels really. They look like their costumes were made out of pieces they pulled out of the trash in the costume room.
I thought the guy was actually a better actor than the role in the makeup demanded.
I agree. He was pretty good.
Yeah.
But maybe this is refreshing. I don't know. But it was really strange when eventually they were just like, yeah, okay, well, it's good to see you guys. Maybe we could like hang out and talk for a bit or so. Like there's no conflict, but it doesn't matter because like any conflict that you tried to manufacture would feel manufactured. And then on top of that, you got Paris and Torres shuffling through a fucking cave for half the good old cave set.
That cave set.
I'll tell you, man. I on the plane back from California, I watched 65. Which is the Adam Driver.
I thought you 65 episodes of Star Trek, but no.
It's the Adam Driver movie where he is from a different planet and he crash lands on
the dinosaur
Earth
one, right?
65 million years ago. Yeah. Which was a great idea the first 6 times they did it on the Twilight Zone 50 years ago.
Was that movie already on the airplane at this point?
Oh, yeah.
Wow.
Yeah. No, that movie... That did nothing.
Yeah.
And I having watched it, I can see why, because it is incredibly boring.
Oh.
And literally I fast forwarded through the middle because the entire middle of the movie is just him and this girl shuffling their way through a cave.
Right.
Literally for like 20 minutes.
Yeah.
And eventually they find the other side of the cave and they get out. And it's just if you're throwing your guys in a cave and they're lost in a cave, generally that's not a great sign for your plot here.
Yeah, we're deep enough in the Star Trek franchise now. Every time I see that cave set, my stomach hurts a little bit. I'm like, come on, just stop sending us down into cave sets. Yeah. And no, I don't think there's been a single episode of Star Trek that has shown rappelling to go well. Every time someone tries to rappel in Star Trek, someone breaks a clavicle or something.
Also, based on the size of that hole and the time it took them to fall and hit the ground, they would have been dead.
Yeah, that's
multiple times over. Neelix would have popped like a grape when he hit the bottom of that thing.
Neelix being the one who fell, it was actually disturbing, or not disturbing. It was distracting to me from that there was a change in Torres, because I would have been like, I'd be fucking pissed at Neelix too if I fell all this way down and not just stagger it onto the top of the fact that like I'm dealing with Neelix down there in this cave, and I'd be annoyed as well. I didn't even pick up that she was suffering from the Farr.
Also, what the thing that stood out to me the most about, if you want to talk about like kind of weird, antiquated sexual politics, was when Vorik shows up. This felt like it was a workplace harassment video. When he shows up and he's like, "Will you marry me?" Torres, on what planet does B'Elanna Torres just not go, no? Yeah, and then like go back to her business. She goes through the whole thing where she's like, "Oh well, you know, I that's very flattering.
Yeah, you're a nice guy. You're a great guy, Vorik." Yeah,
it took her like 10 minutes to say no.
Yeah,
and I was like,
B'Elanna.
This doesn't feel right for B'Elanna, especially, but also like, you know, this feels very much like we haven't quite culturally figured out how workplace sexual harassment works yet, and that it's like it sounded like she was talking to her boss. Yeah, you know, in like one of those kind of things where it's like, oh well, there's a power dynamic. No, she's the fucking chief engineer. There's someone walks up to her and goes, "Hey, will you marry me?" And she goes, "No, get back to your station."
Yeah. I had a bigger problem with it because I don't think B'Elanna would humor him there.
No, not at all.
Yeah. So I mean, if it was like a Troy type character, I could see that conversation going the way that it did. But B'Elanna is supposed to be the fiery, takes no shit character,
right?
And she put up with quite a bit from Vorik there. So,
do you think it would be? This would be a much weirder episode, but do you think it would be more interesting if it was the roles were reversed and Tom Paris was like, "Hey, you know, there's only one way we can fix this," and she's like, "Absolutely not."
She'd rather die.
I am not having sex with you just because some guy roofied me with this weird Vulcan disease.
That's a better episode. If she was willing to die rather than have sex with Tom Paris, I find that to be a much more interesting argument.
Right? Like that's kind of more fun and more interesting. And yeah. I mean, it doesn't make Tom Paris look great, but I mean, if he's making the practical argument, I don't know. But
right. You know, I think he has a leg to stand on there. Yeah.
It seems more interesting.
It does. It's compared to the nothing burger that we get. I feel like it's one of those Voyager episodes that's becoming a little bit of a Voyager special where there's one or several ideas in here that I wish was actually what the episode was about rather than what it is. I liked the scene where the Doctor invites Vorik to the holodeck and tells him about his plan, and he has that holodeck woman, and the Doctor's like, "Come on, just fuck her. She's not real. Just, you know, come on."
The Doctor was really showing his Cy Tolliver colors in this episode.
It's incredibly, and I was just struck by like the meta aspect of it. Like, there's a female actress, right, playing this role, and they're just like, "This isn't a real person. Just fuck her. You know, just get it over with. You'll feel a lot better." And it's like, it's this weird. That's what like the cognitive disconnect is for me with Pon Farr, is that there is like. The holodeck thing, there's room for the holodeck metaphor, like the Cure, and maybe the episode just came out 30 years too early, but I feel like in a modern society, there's like this thing where like the holodeck is the escape that everyone would think that Pon Farr would be cured by, but it turns out that there's an emotional connection that's more important to curing Pon Farr.
Sure.
You know? But they don't do that, and it might just be too early in the 90s, or maybe they can't do that kind of a story. But like that's what that holodeck scene just made me think about, is like all he needs, according to the franchise, is just the mechanical act. And it's just weird that there's a woman standing there who's pretending to be a hologram, that they're just like, have sex with this blow-up doll. Everything will be fine. Just do it. Just do that. And it just strikes me as extremely weird and sort of like uncomfortable.
Yeah, I feel like you can see them backflipping over this stuff a bit, especially at the end when it gets down to the fighting, and they're like, "Well, we need to have B'Elanna actually do the fighting here. We can't have Tom Paris fight for her."
Right.
But that makes sense for her character that she would do that.
Yes. Yep. I agree. It's a stupid fight scene anyway.
It was terrible. Like I was at first I was like, oh, it would be fun if they used the music from the TOS when they fight. But honestly, I was glad they didn't, because that fight scene was garbage.
Just have Chakotay like humming it in the background with some, what is that called, diagenetic sound or something? Just have him be the voice. Well, so
I wonder why. I always wonder why they don't use more wrestling moves in TV shows.
Yes,
because like when they're made to look good on camera. And
remember when Worf chokeslammed the Changeling?
Yeah. Yes.
Yeah.
But especially what I was thinking is like when they first start fighting, they both look less comfortable in a fight than Michael Dorn ever has. And they do this really awkward like choreographed thing where they're not getting anywhere near each other to kind of like she grabs his arm and kind of like spins it.
Yeah, camera's very close so that you can't tell exactly what's going on. Yeah.
And I was just thinking, man, if they had one day of training where someone showed them how to like collar and elbow lock up like you do in wrestling, that just doing that makes it 100 times more believable that it's two people fighting.
Yes, yeah.
You know, I find it. I'm surprised they don't use more of that stuff, because it is the entire point of it is to make it look like two people are kicking the shit out of each other.
So let's, I guess, just hang out on the ending for a little bit. So how do you feel about seeing the Borg again?
That was there are tacked on endings, and then there's the ending to this episode.
Okay,
because when they they have their end bit in the turbo lift, which also is, I don't know, slightly weird, because when Torres leaves and she's like, well, play your cards right, maybe I'll break your back while I fuck you.
You never know.
You know, it makes sense from like a, of course that's the winky way you end this, but like the way that it's built into the rest of the episode, it feels weird. I don't know.
Yep.
But like that's your final bit, and then they just cut back to the planet, which Chakotay is on for some reason.
Yes, with Janeway.
Yeah, and he's like, Janeway, look what I found in the bushes. It was very strange. It was a very strange tacked on ending.
It's so quick.
Yeah, it's very fast. Yeah.
It's but yeah. It's if we were doing the podcast in the way that I probably would have done from the start, if I could do it all over, we would just be doing production wise chronologically going through this. So the Borg would probably, this would seem a little bit more novel at this point, but we're familiar with the modern Trek shows. We know that the Borg exists in every episode of modern Star Trek. We know, basically the entire way that the species has unfolded. Here, I think I'm torn about whether I think that it was appropriate to show them for so little, or to make it be more of a, not a thing, but to like, if you found the Borg corpse early and just had to carry that through the episode, even with the Pon Farr stuff going on, would that have been better? Do you have any opinions about that? Like, is the glimpse you get all that you need and all that is required, or would you have preferred to see them earlier, even if it had nothing to do with the episode, but just to know that they were there at some point?
I don't think so. I feel like that it works better as a tag at the end.
Okay.
What I might have done differently, though, is I might have had that medal that they're looking for. I might have had them find the signature for that at the end and have it be a Borg body.
Oh, okay.
So like that whatever that metal is, they
galenium
find
or something, gallimonium or something. Yeah.
Yeah, and they find it like, oh shit, this is the Borg. Like I think that would have been the cleaner way to do it.
Yeah.
Because that whole looking for the metal thing was kind of pointless.
It's all these tubes buried in the rock.
Yeah, it's like I found the tubes in the rocks. Like that was really silly. And then with the rock people, it's just like, yeah, they told us they'd give us some for nothing.
Yeah.
And so it's not really, it feels very like,
couldn't the rock people have hinted at, aren't you going to take us, or something like that?
Yeah, well, I mean, their whole setup is that they do what they do specifically so they
avoid
being the Borg.
Yeah.
And at the end, it is that they give them the medal because they teach them how to be invisible or something.
Yes.
I'm not really sure.
Yeah.
Which is another thing they don't talk about is the rock people could just disappear.
Yeah. Well, they have that great set of dialogue where B'Elanna's like, there's a hidden door somewhere. And Tom says, I'm not picking up any hidden doors on the tricorder, which is fantastic Star Trek dialogue. Yeah.
But I guess my version would have been like probably no. Well, maybe you could still do the rock people. I don't know. But it would be like, okay, this medal is something that they're still looking for this thing. They still haven't found it yet. And it's sort of the underlying thing of the episode. And then you find them, find it at the end, and it's the Borg.
Yeah, now that I'm thinking about it, I would have had the rock people's dialogue be more cluey towards it being the Borg. I think you'd have to be careful with it. Like I would have had them mention something that could be vaguely interpreted as the Borg, but not overtly that they are talking about the Borg, I think.
Yeah, I think I would be okay with that. Because it is I think the thing that hinders this is that I don't know if maybe we are desensitized, you and I are desensitized specifically because of the order we've watched things, or if at this point this Voyager has done this enough where it is desensitizing everybody. But when they come down to this planet and it's another, there was a great war and people died and we had to go underground. It's just like, I don't really give a shit. Like this doesn't mean anything to me.
Yeah.
This just feels like a filler thing.
Yeah.
And so I'm not interested or intrigued by the story of how the rock people ended up underground, you know?
Yeah. I'd agree. That is that's a big takeaway that we've had, which is how lazy the later shows got with just defining alien species that they run into. It is 50% of them are just like, we had a war and we're the survivors. And the other 50% are, this is a prison planet. So get ready to go to jail.
And, there's so many more interesting ways to do this too, instead of like just finding a body in the bushes, like it's Stand By Me or something. Like there are so many phrases and stuff associated with the Borg. Like if you're Chakotay and you're talking to the guy and asking them what happened, and they're like, these people came from the sky and we out of nowhere and completely decimated us. We did our best to hold them off, but ultimately our attempt was futile. And like just saying that word is like, oh shit, I know exactly what's going on,
Yeah. It would have been nice. I wonder. My question, if I was watching this live as Voyager was coming out, and I had been watching it sort of like in this way that I would have liked to have done the podcast if I could do it over, just to watch everything through. If you were a Trek superfan who had seen everything up to this point in order, does this seem the way that I now interpret it as Voyager is having an incredibly shitty season? What do we do to fix this at this point? Mm-hmm. It really seems that way, where it's like, especially because they haven't particularly been hinting towards this. Like no one's even brought up the Borg, even though they're in the area of space that we know the Borg are from originally. Mm-hmm. That's my thing about it. It's just like, this seems like a real sort of ratings grab, like headline on the Trek forum internet stuff at the time to bring the Borg back, and the Borg are involved, obviously, moving forward. But I don't know if this was the impetus to do that, was just how shitty the third season has been so far.
Yeah, I mean, unfortunately, I feel like every appearance of the Borg since the first one has been a we need a ratings boost.
Yep, sure.
A trend which continues to this day.
To diminishing returns.
I don't know, because I'm surprised, given that they've done 2.5 seasons in the Delta Quadrant. This is the first time that they've even come up.
Yep. I don't think they've mentioned them. I think I would have remembered. I don't think they've brought them up.
I feel like we talked about that early on, where it's like, well, obviously the Borg has to be at least considered, and apparently not.
Yeah.
Like, shouldn't everybody in the Delta Quadrant be like ravaged?
Yeah, you'd imagine they would talk about them more. Although it's, again, this is a show that's insisted that the Kazon space was approximately a gajillion light years wide,
Right.
and like it took forever to get across it. So it's like the distance means nothing at this point. But you would imagine, like when the DS9 crew went to the Gamma Quadrant, all everybody ever talked about was, have you met the Dominion yet? Once they get over there, you'd think the Borg would have something to say about this, but I don't know.
Yeah, it feels that's a tough call because, like, on the one hand, it's like, well, if you're doing a show in the Delta Quadrant, it's got to be in the back of your mind, somewhere.
Yeah.
That it's like, okay, well, eventually, but it's not like they've. I think it would have been. It would feel less like a ratings boost or like we just gotta punch this up a bit if they had taken the season to sort of lead up to it.
Yeah.
Because especially if they're exiting known space, and I don't know. I feel like there's some stuff in there where you could have been building up to the reveal that the Borg are coming, but it's, or you could just find them in a bush somewhere.
The next episode is a Borg episode, too. Mm-hmm. So we'll see. All right, let's go to the Patreon comments.
I was just gonna say, the thing that's so unfortunate about the Borg is that I feel like every time someone uses it, it feels like you've run out of ideas.
Yeah.
Which is a shame because, you don't feel that way when the Klingons show up. It's like, well, for some reason the Borg is just such a hot villain.
Yeah, they're too.
Feels,
you can't push them. You can push the Klingons. You can do what is it to not be a Klingon episode. The Borg. The farther the Borg get away from what they were originally supposed to be, it's just the less meaningful they are as a concept. Picard season 2 with the Borg cooperative, like what the fuck? Like is this a serious idea that's being bounced around? It just completely undermines everything about what they represent, and like it doesn't do anything interesting, or it doesn't even really seem to understand them, what they are. So we'll see how Voyager does with that, because I think Voyager's still in the pocket of kind of understanding what the Borg are supposed to be.
Yeah, well, we'll see.
All right, next comment, patreon.com/the Pensky File. If you guys enjoyed the show today, you can go there. You can support us, and you can leave thoughts about upcoming episodes, and we read them on the podcast, like we're about to read this one from Kyle Barat, who I will send over to you right now, Clay.
Blood Fever. Shockingly, this is only the franchise's second Pon Farr episode, so I would have been quite happy just seeing a Vulcan far from home and an adequate mate struggling through the process rather than throwing in the extra twist with B'Elanna. The scenes with Vorik being the master of his domain were the highlight, but why create a side character for this storyline when Tuvok is right there? I guess they don't want to upset the status quo, but Tuvok frothing at the crotch and rubbing himself on Janeway would have been fascinating. And there's also the drama of him cheating on his wife. Using the holodeck to get around Pon Farr is a neat idea, although all Vorik needed to be instantly cured was to see Neelix poured into that tight bodysuit. The fight at the end...
yeah, his repelling suits, I guess. They do look great in those little repelling suits.
The fight at the end feels like a cop-out, and death being the ultimate symptom of Pon Farr ruins the drama of it because there's no good reason to deny B'Elanna when it means saving her life. 2 Paris is choosing the wrong time to be gentlemanly out of 5.
Agreed. Textile Bear says, blood fever. It's shag or die time. This had to happen sooner or later. That said, the Vulcan can pass on the Pon Farr craze telepathically. That sounds like a psychic version of spiking someone's drink. Yuck. Jaron Hatch says, just once, I'd like to see one of these fuck or die Star Trek episodes actually result in fucking rather than the dance around it fuckery that the franchise seems to have a hard-on for. But no, fighting to the death, or mild fatigue in this case, is apparently more ethically preferable than life-saving sex. Oh well, it's still the second best Pon Farr episode they ever did. Also, Borg, 2.5 positive masturbation messages out of 5. The Condal says, there's not a lot of interesting stuff going on for my taste, but it's a clear turning point in the series. We knew the Borg would make an appearance, and there are corpses at the end of this episode. Sorry, I just thought that was a funny sentence for some reason. Not sure it's better, but there's more focus to the series from this point on. 2 Pon Farr holograms out of 5.
Did the Doctor felt like he was he felt like he was a pimp in this episode. He was being real creepy.
Yeah, I wanted more creepiness when he's talking to Janeway at the very end, and Janeway's like, "That's nice, dear," and fucks off. But I don't know. It's just 90s Trek can't do it. I guess it's not. It doesn't have the cojones to talk about these things in a way that would be interesting.
It's weird because you'd think that 90s Trek would be able to get into this stuff, given the, I don't know. It seems like that was when this kind of discussion was all the rage,
Yeah. Yep. Patrick Seba.
There's that whole song, Let's Talk About Sex. Apparently they never heard that on Voyager.
When Vulcans get horny, though wait, not too Vok, Kid Vorik's grown up, but he can't fill the sock. Oh yeah, there's a plot about what I forgot, but Berman's rough draft needed cuffs and a lock. 2 freeze-frame post-credit cliffhangers out of 5. This is a short one. I'll read this one too. Blood fever from Norman Buckwald. Okay, so Pon Farr can now be spread telepathically. I can think of better plots to get Paris and Torres together and without doing favors for a showrunner's son. Thankfully, Dawson knows how to act, and that's what makes this episode watchable. 2.5 Quark-inspired holosuite substitutes out of 5.
I did think she was really good in this episode. I think she's kind of got a lot to do. And I thought she was pretty good.
Oh, okay, yeah. Yeah, honestly, some of the dialogue between Paris and B'Elanna is so cringeworthy that I applauded both actors for being able to do it in the first place. A lot of it's pretty rough. Sorry, there was some comment here that I wanted to... no, I guess not. Grappler John Zorn is our next comment, and I'm sending it to you.
Amok Time conceived the Pon Farr as a device to explore a to-the-death confrontation between Kirk and Spock and to establish the depths of their friendship. Some of this episode seems like a good faith effort to explore this part of the Trek universe and to create some Tom B'Elanna tension that will pay off in future episodes. Unfortunately, the rest of the episode is some kind of date rape metaphor that embraces desire as something to be resisted at all costs. Even in dialogue, sexual desire is met with, "You're not thinking straight," or "It's better if they engage in ritual combat." Thankfully, Vorik shows up at the end to save everyone's virginity and B'Elanna from herself, because in this show, female sexual desire is cast as so completely improper that it obviously must be the result of alien influence. 2 toxic, coxic, cockblock, cuck-amuck Spock talks out of 5. I'm amazed I got that on the first try. I mean, honestly, that is the thing that's weird about this, right?
I think this is a great comment. I agree with everything that this comment says.
The 2 times, if not counting the movie, the 2 times that they've shown Pon Farr from a male point of view, it results in fighting someone to the death.
Yeah.
And the 2 times after, including this after that they show Pon Farr from the women's point of view, the entire thing is all of the men shrinking away as to why they just couldn't why they couldn't have sex with this woman.
Yes.
And it is a really strange sort of dichotomy, because like I can understand, I think the thing is, I understand the thought process of, I mean, we can't have him have sex with her because that just looks really bad from like a external viewing point of view.
Yeah. You mean in that context because she's under the influence of something, right? Regardless of whether or not it's a biological function, the way that Pon Farr is presented is they are under the influence of something they are not themselves, right? Yeah.
And so the minute that you have a male crew member have sex with someone who's in that position, then it gets kind of weird and cringy. At least that's what I assume that they're thinking. And I mean, I would be curious to see them go through with it just to see the response. I would be very interested to see what the response is.
Yeah. Well,
especially now.
So, I mean, I'm just thinking through this now. And the original where the men fight or fuck, right, is a not even very thinly veiled metaphor about it's really just a sci-fi thing of the male biological drive to like an extreme, right? And the Vulcans just give it a name as to what it is.
Yeah, because it's Amok Time. Is it the story like the reason that they fight is because Spock's girlfriend chooses Kirk or something like that.
Yeah. So there's it's basically a sci-fi allegory about like male biological response to sex and violence there, right? So it's just like this heightened version of it. The female thing, this story, what Grappler John Zorn, and I think there was a comment before, is pointing out is that like this is an extremely like conservative approach to what if females get this disease, right?
Right.
And that's like it's like upsetting to everyone. And so that's where my conflict comes from, is that like I see it less as she's under the influence, and it's more just strange that the female character can't get sex from the traditional male characters because it's seen as like not genderly appropriate for them to do that with them. Yeah. And so it's very old fashioned about like, and I feel like a smarter show would have taken that and been like, why is there this kind of double standard when we flip it and make a female character the one who has the Pon Farr issue?
Yeah.
You know?
Well, I do think that I think you could get away with that easier on Enterprise, where T'Pol is a Vulcan.
Yeah.
I think the thing that makes it weird in this is that Pon Farr is put upon B'Elanna.
Yeah, okay, that's
yeah. I think that's the thing that makes it dicey here.
That's fair, I think. Changeling says, blood fever. Feel the blood, feel the blood fever. Vulcans don't know how to do it. I think this episode would have worked better as a comedy. Imagine Tom and Harry, I know, but he's the only one I could think of, taking this guy on speed dates, peeping into sonic showers, panty raids, and dressing up as Darth Vader to trick a woman into thinking that he's her boyfriend. And if you think that's in bad taste, remember, 3 crew members stand by while an officer tries to beat his superior into submission to have sex with her. 1 slam dunk pinball machine out of 5. Yep.
Yeah, it is kind of weird that Tuvok just turns into the Ken Watanabe gif from Godzilla, where it's just let them fight.
Yep. I'll send you this one. This is Artorius with this comment about blood fever.
Star Trek continues its illustrious career of not being able to portray romance or sex in any meaningful narrative form. A very contrived chain of circumstances that rival some of the most cliche anime moments of trying to get 2 characters together. On a side note, they can't choreograph fights either. And not to sound sexist and racist in one go. All right, here we go. But aren't Vulcans supposed to be stronger than Klingons, much less a male over a female in purely physical fight? The Borg reveal at the end was nice, a good setup for things to come. 2 pataks out of 5. Vorik doesn't exactly look like he's not hitting the weight room.
In the gym, no. I don't know. I would have to. I need like a Star Trek trading card to tell me whether or not who has the stronger.
Who's got the higher agility?
Yeah. I don't. I guess Vulcans should be stronger. I don't really know. I don't know. Let's see here. Matt Ross says, Blood Fever, the horniest episode when the Doctor introduces porn as a curative. The silliness of how Pon Farr transfers and the rather odd suggestion/order to Tom to give B'Elanna sex to chill her out is rather humorous. Oh, and there are weird rock people. The best things to take from this one is the awkward, flirty conversation with Tom and B'Elanna at the end, which is way better than the soap opera crap dialogue in the cave and the Borg reveal. 3 horny orders out of 5.
It is funny when you think about how anytime they do one of these, the crew is magically too horny to control themselves.
Yep.
The only time they've ever shown someone go through with it, as far as I know, is Data and Tasha.
Yeah.
And it seemed really positive for Data. Like he came away from that like a much better person.
That's the Star Trek approach. That's how all of this Pon Farr should come out. It should be like everyone should just be like, well, that was fascinating. It's like a scientist's approach to sex. I would have, just you have to give Tom some reason to be scared. Maybe I'm just coming to this late, but like I know the Klingons are violent, but I think they had to do a better job of like maybe Tom would die from the sex with a Klingon. There's some sort of twist that needs to happen. This is Blood Fever from Poindexter G. I just sent to you.
Blood Fever. It's a whole episode about B'Elanna needing to get her some. Trek trying to be sexy is like that weird skanky girl you know who's trying to make a sexy Instagram post. It's just embarrassing.
Mm-hmm.
I did my best Jim Carrey impersonation and sang the TOS fight music over Torres and Vorik's combat, and it improves things quite a bit. The big Borg reveal could be pretty shocking if you didn't know that they were showing up soon. I recall when this originally aired that word had already broken out about the Borg coming to Voyager, so the big fans that would care the most already knew.
Oh, there's your answer. It was not surprising. Jonas says Blood Fever, 1 out of 5. Nick the Rat says Blood Fever. This isn't about sci-fi. This is about sex in the Borg. 2 blue balls for Tom out of 5. Undiscovered Mugato, Blood Fever, the final comment. This is the one they should have had Riker on so he could explain the birds and the bees to everybody. They're all horny as Stovacor, but literally no one bangs. Vorik fakes it with the hologram, so that doesn't count. Also, how come every time Trek goes spelunking, someone fucks up? 2 Borgs in your bush out of 5. Some very good comments from this one. Thank you, everybody. The Pon Farr gave you all the creative juices to just give us what we needed in terms of Patreon content. Thanks, everybody, for leaving your thoughts at patreon.com/the Pensky File. That's it. Blood Fever, Clay. I think the patrons are going to give this one an average of 2. I think.
That's what it feels
what are you going to say?
I think this is a 3. Okay. I think this is better than the ones we've watched recently.
Mm-hmm.
I think it still feels very slapdash in the elements that it's playing with, and But I wasn't as bored or confused as much as I have been the past few episodes.
I actually liked our conversation about it more than I liked the episode.
Sure.
I think it's one of those ones where the episode is not very great, but the ideas are kind of or like the failure to execute on the ideas is kind of interesting. So I'm going to give it a 2 as an episode, but I think it's better than that in terms of like kind of a weird, it's sort of like a shitty version of Tuvix. You know, it's like the ideas are there, but it's not executed as well as Tuvix is. So I'll give it a 2. I think you can give it a 3 to balance it out, so it's not quite one of the worst episodes of the season. That's it for Blood Fever. Thanks, everybody. Patreon.com/the Pensky File. If you want to support the show, you go there. Support us. A couple $1 a month. You get extra stuff. Clay, do you have anything you want to say?
On Patreon, Amanda and I are covering films off the Video Nasties list. This July, we covered Bay of Blood, which is an Italian horror movie from 1971 that is kind of basically creates and at the same time satires the slasher genre that was to come about 10 years later. Pretty interestingly. It's worth checking out. It's hard to find, so you can find it on YouTube though. And keep checking out Badass. Sean and I are rounding out season 2 of Batman Beyond. And then we'll be into, I think we're going to do Return of the Joker on our little hiatus there.
Cool.
And pick up, what's that book I wrote? Batman White Knight Presents Generation Joker #3, which is on shelves right now.
There you
Written
go.
by myself and Sean and Katana Collins. So, yeah, that would be great.
Thank you, everybody, for listening to our podcast today. We'll be back with Unity, I believe is the next episode it is. Unity. So we greatly appreciate you listening. Thanks for listening, supporting the show, leaving comments, all that good stuff.
That was weeks ago, motherfucker. I saw, I don't know if you saw that article about the person saying that I think you should, her boyfriend quoting, I think you should leave, was like a disease affecting all men of a certain age that was slowly driving all their girlfriends insane.
No, sorry, what is this? Quoting.
Do you know the Tim Robinson Netflix show, I Think You Should Leave?
Oh no, I don't think so.
Have you ever watched it?
No, I don't think so.
You should check it out. I'd be interested to see what you think of it. But it's a very it's very quotable in like a if you they're really specific quotes that make no sense out of context.
Okay, right. They're like it's like a meme generator show, basically. Yeah.
Kind of, yeah. It's smarter than that, but yes, there are a ton of memes. But I saw someone respond to that saying like, well, this person obviously isn't old enough to have every single person they went to college with inform everyone else that they were Rick James bitch over and over and over again.
That was a great That was college, right? When that happened?
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. That was a phenomenon.
Charlie Murphy.
As I don't think it was that one. I think it was the Prince one. He has that line that kills me. He's like, for all you motherfuckers who are acting hard now, I saw what you were wearing in like 1986.
Yes. You didn't get it in the men's section.
That's it. Thanks everybody for listening. Go check out Chappelle's show.
Shalimar got this new chick named Mickey Free. She fine as a motherfucker.
What a great show. Thanks everybody for listening. See you next time.